Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi and our guest today is Tito Kunyuk. And Tito is a Kadhi. Tito, welcome to the Elephant TV.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Tito, can you start by giving us a brief historical background of the Kadhis Court in Kenya?
The Kadhi Court is part of the legal systems, is part of the courts of Kenya. And it's a court which uses Islamic law as its source of law. And you know, Islamic law is a law that's recognized globally. And in some countries, it is a source of law. And in other countries, it's the source of law for source of law in those countries. So Kadhi courts, when we talk about Kadhi courts, we are talking about the Kadhi, and the Kadhi is a judge who handles issues to do with Islamic law, who listens to cases that pertain to questions Islamic law. And if we want to trace about the history of the Kadhi Court, we will trace it to the time of the Prophet. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam performed distinct roles as one as the Imam, who is the political leader of the Muslim community. He performed the roles of the conveyor of the message of God, that is the messenger of God. He also performed the roles of a Mufti. A Mufti meaning someone who is asked questions of law, and he gives answers to those case scenarios that is being asked. And then he also performed the roles of a Kadhi. The roles of a Kadhi means that people brought cases before him, and he handled those cases using the law. And since that time, the Prophet put the rubrics of what we now call the Kadhi courts. And at the time of the four caliphate, those roles were performed by different individuals. And then after the four caliphs, we have now the Umayyad and the Abbasid dynasties up to the Ottoman dynasty, which ended in 1924. So during all that time, the Kadhi courts in various countries across the world have been operating. But for the case of the Kadhi courts in Kenya, its recent antecedents can be traced to the establishment of the Omani Sultanate in Zanzibar in the 19th century. So, and there is the whole question of the 10-mile coastal strip, which stretched all the way from Kismayu to Mozambique. All that area was under the Sultanate of Zanzibar. So the Kadhi courts flourished alongside the east coast of Africa during all those times. But in
Kenya, there seems to be a controversy about it. Why?
In Kenya, it's controversial because we now have the modern state. And the modern state means we have laws that are promulgated, especially we have the constitution, which is like the supreme law of the land. So the place of religion in a constitutional structure is what is contested by people, maybe people who are not Muslims. But also within the Kadhi courts, we have differences of opinion among different ideologies within the Muslim community in Kenya. So we have people who are leaning towards the Salafi thought, and we have people who are leaning towards the Sufi thought, and the Sufi thought has been there across the centuries. And we know the Salafi thought started in the 1930s, 1940s, infiltrating into the Kenyan space, and it has been quite something from the 1970s to the 80s to the 90s up to the 2000s, because of the graduates from Muslim universities who graduated from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and all the other countries which profess the Salafi thinking. So the controversies in the Kadhis courts are not necessarily because of the legal schools of thought, but they are because of these two strands of thinking among the Muslim community. So we have the controversy of it being an issue of promoting one religion above the other, and we also have the internal struggles among the Muslims themselves. Yes.
Would you mind talking about it, in both cases within the Muslims, because of various differences and school of thoughts and madahib, but also from outside who see an imposition of the faith?
The Kadhis court is essentially a court of law, but before the current constitution, Kadhis used to operate as being religious leaders, and at the same time being civil servants. And the Muslims have not been able to make a distinction between the two. And with the coming of the 2010 constitution, it clearly stated that Kadhis are judicial officers. So the remnants of what Kadhis used to do, I think it is what is bringing confusion within the Muslim community as to the roles of the Kadhis themselves. Because when you look at the question, for example, of moon sighting, which I think in the coming weeks it will be a question of contestation. The question of moon sighting used to be with the Mufti. And the Mufti in the 1930s and the 1940s was called Sheikhul Islam. And Sheikhul Islam had the two jurisdictions of being Mufti and a Kadhi. So by the time we've now transitioned to the 2010 constitution, it will have been imperative if we distinguished the roles of the Kadhi and the role of the Mufti on issues of importance within the Muslim community, because now the Kadhi is fully a judicial officer, but still he performs those roles because we do not have a substantive body that can handle those roles and maybe become a reference point for the government on setting dates for holiday and something of the sort. So I think maybe because of the overlap of those roles, we still have those controversies. Yes.
Let's talk about the appointment of a female Kadhi, correct? Because Article 170 provides for appointment of a Kadhi, but does not specify the gender. But over the last few months, particularly when the retired Chief Justice mentioned this, it became something of a lightning rod within the community. Can you speak about that place and also why it's broadly seen as such?
The question of women being Kadhis is a question even our colleagues within the judiciary are asking. Why do we have women Muslim magistrates, women Muslim judges, and we don't have women Kadhis? So it's not only a question that Muslims only are concerned with, but the issue is the issue relates to understanding of religious texts, the Quran and the Hadith, pertaining to women being in leadership positions. So we have, for example, the verse the verse that says, "Ar-rijal qawwamuna 'ala nisa," that men are the maintainers and protectors of women. We have, for example, a hadith which says, "La yufliha qawmun wallau amrahum imra'ah," that there will no a society that makes a woman a ruler over them will not prosper. So engaging such texts has been problematic across the centuries. So we have scholars who have taken this text literal and said women do not have a role within the public spaces, because the work of a judge is a work that is performed within the public space. And some texts also say women should not move out of the domestic sphere. Now, but the problem is with us having a constitution that has a Bill of Rights that's more pronounced on issues of equality between men and women. With us having women coming out performing all those other roles, for example, being parliamentarians, being managers in corporations, being ministers in government. So it really boggles the mind. Why do we, for example, as Muslims, allow Muslim women to perform all these roles and not the role of the Kadhi? Is it because maybe these are kind of secular roles and the role of Kadhi is not secular in that sense? And there's that whole distinction between the Kadhis Court being a religious court or a civil court that applies a law that derives from religious sources. So that is where the problem lies with. But still, when you look at the substance of the jurisprudence of scholars, the understanding of the scholars across the centuries, it has never been monolithic. There are scholars who have taken those texts literally, but there are scholars who have also contextualized it and said some of these verses applied to the specific context in which they were revealed. Some of the hadith were said by the Prophet based on the context in which he lived. And now we are in a new, we are in the modern world, and we are also moving into the postmodern world. And some of these things may not apply. If we want to apply them, that will mean a section of the population will not be able to move an inch. So I think from those arguments, and there are scholars for this and there are scholars for that, but it depends with the issue of who speaks for Muslims here in Kenya.
Which takes us to the appointment of the Mufti recently, Sheikh Omar. This is something that people have been calling for some time now. Now that has happened, what are your thoughts?
As I've said, the Mufti was one of the jurisdictions that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam held. And it's not a thing that can be taken lightly, because the qualifications of a Mufti are like the same qualifications of a Kadhi. He has to have the mastery of the Quran, the mastery of Hadith. He has to master Islamic law. He has to have an understanding of the social environment in which he lives in. But even when it comes to the issue of appointment, the practice across the centuries has been that some muftis were appointed by the state based on recommendation of the peers of the mufti. But some muftis were muftis based on their performance within society. You see, being a mufti, you will teach in the mosques, you will deliver lectures, and you will have a greater following. So there is the issue of legitimacy, and there is the issue of authoritativeness. So how does a Mufti appointed, for example, by an individual have legitimacy within the Muslim community? And a Muslim, a Mufti appointed also by a head of state, for example, have legitimacy and authority within the Muslim community. When we look around in our East African neighbors, for example, Zanzibar has a Mufti with specific roles and is appointed by the head of state. Tanzania, Uganda has a Mufti who is selected from the equivalent of Supreme Council of Kenyan Muslims, and then is appointed and is recognized by the government. Now, with the recent appointments, and it's something I'm still following up to know how this thing is really going to work. I don't know how it will work on the question of legitimacy. Will the Mufti appointed by, for example, Sheikh Juma Ngao be representative of the views or the authority of the Muslims in Kenya? Or will he be just maybe like a political appointee or something of the sort? So there is that whole question of religious authority, because a Mufti has to be a religious authority. He has to know the law, and he also has to have the influence of his peers and the understanding of Muslims behind him, so that when people ask those questions, those novel questions that the Mufti is supposed to give answers to, then at least his answers will gain the credibility, legitimacy, and the authority that the Mufti is always supposed to enjoy. Yes.
Tito, thank you so much. I think that's amazing, and I'll let you go for now. And thank you, and let's engage another time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.